Welcome back to Gale Force Wins Season 4.
The Gale Force Winds podcast is proudly sponsored by the Newfoundland and Labrador Construction Association. The NLCA provides unparalleled opportunities for its members through industry education, construction information, government advocacy, and networking events. The NLCA is building Newfoundland and Labrador. For more information, visit nlca.ca.
Well, folks, here we are. This is Gale Force Wins, and it's a Tuesday night episode. What do I mean by that? Well, on Tuesday nights, we feature inspiring people. Mike Herriott is someone I went to high school with. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second, but he's inspired me in the musical world for many, many, many years, and he's gone on and done amazing things, and he's moved back into St. John's. I'm not going to steal his thunder when he introduces himself, but I want to say that, Gale Force Winds is going to continue to give Tuesday night inspirational episodes. We actually, our business model is to travel around the world doing trade shows. That morphed out of our Zoom on Zoom in the middle of the pandemic, of which Mike and his wife Oprah were our guests. Without further ado, I want to ask Mike to introduce himself.
Well, Jerry, I'm Mike. Nice to meet you. I think we did that back in, what would have been, 81? Brother Ice High School Band.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you right off the bat because I said this to you through Facebook as we were communicating. I'll never forget the first day in band at Brother Rice, and I'm an amateur trumpet player, and you'll see we've got our trumpets here. This is a professional. I'm an amateur. Anyway, long story short, Mike sat down next to me, and you probably don't even remember this, and you did a few things on the trumpet, and I was like, holy shit. That's the way the trumpet is to be played. But then you went and you took a saxophone. I believe you did some work on the drums. And I don't even know.
I've never played a saxophone.
You've never?
No.
Okay, well, you know what? Maybe I'm embellishing it. But
my parole officer has told me that's my official line. I've never played it. No, I don't play any woodwind instruments. But I have delved into other brass instruments, just kind of out of necessity. And I picked up playing the trombone when I was living out west in BC.
Yeah.
Just because it looks like so much fun to do, And everyone, I knew so many great trombone players out in Vancouver, Victoria, that it always looked like they were all having so much fun playing it. I figured I'd try. So it's the thing about the brass instruments is that they're all related very closely, because with the trumpet, when you press down this valve here, it adds enough metal to the instrument to lower it a semitone.
Right.
And then you press this one down, it adds twice as much metal. This one here adds 3 times as much metal. So between the 3 of those, the combination of them, you can add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 7 different instruments, essentially. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So with the harmonic series, so there's 7 different instruments that you got there. All those notes overlap, so you can play a chromatic scale, and you've got all the notes you need. And with a trombone, it's even more simple. Of course, all the trombone players are out there going, no, son. That's the 7th one. I forgot that on the trumpet. All 3 valves.
Yeah.
And that's about as far as you can push the slide out without it falling off. So the relationship between all brass instruments is that they all kind of work the same. And so this was like a thing. This is how I got into playing the trumpet. Was that my dad, when he was a kid growing up with the Mills and the the Millery bands in England.
Yeah. What's a Millery band?
Well, it's like a brass band, like the movie Brassed Off.
Yeah.
Basically, like the Black Dyke Band or whatever in England. Same kind of model as the Salvation Army bands that we see, the brass bands,
right.
British brass bands. Everyone reads treble clef, so they can play any of the instruments in the band because they all work the same. They can go from alto horn to tenor horn to baritone to trombone to tuba to trumpet to cornet or whatever, solo cornet, E flat cornet, same fingerings, and you just read the notes out of the page, and so whatever you're playing, it always looks the same, right? So that's basically all brass instruments are basically the same physics. So when I discovered that a long time ago, I thought, well, it's not that much of a stretch. Like for saxophone, you got to remember all the keys, right?
Yeah. Clarinet,
it's even worse. And flute, I don't know. I can't get my head around. Oboe, forget about it, right? Bassoon, it's so much to carry around for so little reward.
I'll tell you a quick story. So not that I'm bored, but I was getting a little bored with the trumpet, and my aunt had a flute. She's a deceased now music teacher. So I had the flute in my house for a couple of years trying to practice it and figure it out. Couldn't figure it out. Susan Doyle, if you remember Susan, she was at my house, and she picked it up. Very accomplished flautist. And she said to me, Jerry, this is broken. I said, what? I was 2 years, Mike, trying to figure this thing out. And it was one of the important keys at the top of the register, whatever, was broken. But anyway, sorry.
So you got it fixed and you still couldn't play. Exactly.
That's correct.
That's how it works.
Since we're geeking out on instruments, I noticed you got, I believe is that a piccolo trumpet right there? What's that one there?
That's a piccolo.
And it's got 4.
It's got 4 valves.
I got mic'd up here, and so hopefully we don't pull down everything. Yeah, talk a little bit about that 4th valve, and then we're going to go back to your journey a little bit.
Well, the 4th valve, believe it or not, you notice that this trombone has a trigger, it's got a valve on it. That valve does the exact same thing as the 4th valve on the piccolo trumpet.
Is that right?
Yeah, and if you ever see a euphonium or a tuba with 4 valves, the 4th valve does the exact same thing. And basically, it's so it's enough metal in that pipe there to add a whole perfect 4th to the instrument. So we can lower the instrument more than if I was playing the B flat trumpet here. Now this is an A, so it's a bit of a different key, but all those 7 notes that we talked about.
Yep.
So that's the equivalent. This is in a slightly different key, but this allows me to go. After that, the notes below that don't seem to be very much in tune, so you kind of wonder what's the point.
Yeah.
But the other thing that the 4th valve does is it allows you to, because as we all know, you have to use this trigger and it makes it a little bit easier to tune your 1 and 3. This is really brass geek stuff here, but you can have this so that it's easier. You don't have to mess around with so many tubes and all that stuff. So there's a bunch of purposes for this 4th valve here. It makes it just easier to play the instrument, essentially.
I watched one of your videos last night, and the Penny Lane in particular was spectacular. What a wonderful video you made. Let me ask you this. When it comes to playing this instrument, you're so used to 3 valves. Like, how much practice would you have to do to incorporate the concept of knowledge and knowing when to press the 4th? Like, for me, I'm like, okay, I've got 3 not down because I'm an amateur, but I have 3 that I can work with.
Well, it's any type of practice, effective practice. I hope I don't rip my cable here. Any kind of effective practice is essentially concept building.
Yeah.
Right? You're solidifying a concept within your brain, within your body, to remember how to make something happen so that you don't have to think about it. And so proper practice, proper approach to practicing is basically takes enough repetition so that you forget what you're doing. It turns the primary task into a secondary task. It becomes second nature, right? So an example, a really good example, is during COVID, the Arts and Culture Centers here in Newfoundland asked my wife, Offer Harnoy, and myself to do a tour of the island, playing all the different arts and culture centers. And because it was COVID, it was only the two of us were allowed to be on the tour. We couldn't bring a piano player with us because normally when we do a recital concert, we have a piano player that we hire. We couldn't do that. And so we thought, well, because at that point we were doing a lot of stuff with piano and trumpet and cello, or French horn, or flugelhorn and cello, sometimes trombone and cello. We also had a piano player playing with us. And because we couldn't do that, we were thinking, well, we do have some stuff that is only cello and one of the horns, but that's going to get awful boring. Now, when I was a kid, I was pretty serious at playing the piano, and I practiced and did a lot of stuff, a lot of playing in the music festival here, up until sort of my late teens. And then I got kind of swept away with playing the trumpet, and all that career kind of stuff took over. So, but I was a very serious student on the piano, and so Offer said, well, because she hears me playing the piano all the time, I try and work my way through some of the old Chopin stuff that I used to play, and she said, well, we could do some of this stuff. And so she handed me some music, and I'm looking, I'm going, well, this is really hard. This is like the David Popper Hungarian Rhapsody it's got all this like really fast 16th note kind of stuff, and I'm going, you know what? I got nothing better to do. Like, it's COVID. We're not going anywhere. So
not performing anywhere else.
So what I did is I set the metronome, and I set it on a really slow speed, tempo di lerno, as they say in Italian, and I played it over and over and over and over again at a slow tempo, and made sure that I was getting into the center of every note, made sure it was rhythmically proper, it made rhythmic sense, and I played it over and over very slowly, and then I would move the metronome up a notch, and I'd play it a little bit faster, and then I'd move it back down, and I'd maybe mess with the rhythms a little bit just to kind of, basically it's the same thing for practicing any instrument, is that it just takes hours and hours and hours of dedication and slow practice. And one of the simple principles of practicing that I've always told people, and I try to uphold myself, is that if I'm happy with how I sound when I'm practicing, then I'm not working hard enough. Because you need to find the holes, the gaps in your playing, and then you do what it takes to spend the time working on those things. If there's an area of your instrument that you're, some fingering stuff or playing in a certain key or whatever, that you go, I'm just not good at that. Then you take that one thing and you spend a lot of time working at it until you are good at it. And so for this stuff that I was doing with Offer, we went and did this tour, and I learned this music, and I became a better piano player for having done that. And now when we go out and do concerts, we're going out to Ontario to do some concerts at the beginning of April, and we do work with a piano player in Toronto who comes with us. But there's some of the stuff that Offer and I did on that tour that she still wants me to play the piano part for, even though we have a piano part player there. Because she feels comfortable with me playing it. Not that she doesn't feel comfortable with the other people playing it, but it's kind of become, we have a language, and it's one of these things we enjoy playing. So, I wouldn't say I'm the best person in the world to play the piece, but I think I do a pretty solid job on it. And the only reason I'm able to even get close to it is because of slow practice. And that translates to absolutely any instrument. One of the important things, I think, to lead you towards success in practicing is having a concept of where you're getting to. That's the other key to a good practice habit. If you have a good recording of the piece that you're playing, that really helps. Or even better, I've found a lot of times for me, when I've got something I'm trying to figure out how to play it on the trumpet, and I'm just not, it's not sitting right, it's not coming into my brain. I find a video of somebody who I know plays it and who I admire their playing, and so I'll watch the video, see what they do physically, try and get my head around what they're doing physically, see what's going on with how they're breathing and what they're doing physically to make it happen. And also, you know, getting your head around the sound of it and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, concept building, you know, having the idea in your mind, knowing where you're going and knowing how to get there, and knowing how to get there. Most of that is just the hard work, dedication of slow practice and getting yourself inside of it. As far as these extra valves go, this one, what you're talking about with the piccolo trumpet, I picked up playing that years and years ago, so it's become second nature for me, right?
Yeah.
You know what I was talking about when something becomes a secondary task, a secondary nature. For this guy here, even though it's the same concept as that, I still have to think about this trigger because I haven't spent enough time playing with the trigger. I use this horn for any of the lower stuff, more classical stuff that I have to record. And most of the stuff I'm doing is either my own big band stuff, which usually I'm cursing myself for having written it so hard, or other people's stuff. And I just want to make it sound good. So I'll practice that part until I've got it down so I can do it fluidly. But if I was to play in an orchestra, I'd have to stop and think about it a lot, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if I was playing on a gig, so I don't take this out anywhere. I just work with it in the studio. I can make it sound good in here, but I don't do gigs on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's only so far I'll take it, you know? I'm not looking for a career in trombone. This one here, less moving parts. There's only one moving part, so, you know, how hard can it be?
Well, you know, Mike, yeah, well, whatever. Sorry to all the trombone players out there, but I got to ask you this. You know, the slow-moving practice was fascinating. And, you know, the day you sat next to me in high school, you were, what, 16, 17, whatever? You were already very, very accomplished on the trumpet. Talk a little bit about how much time, first of all, I guess, who gave you a trumpet and how did you get started on the trumpet? And then delve into the time that you put into it.
I mentioned earlier my dad grew up playing in the brass bands in England, and he was a very accomplished musician. A lot of people here in St. John's knew my dad, John Herriott, but nobody knew him as a brass player, as a trumpet player. And he wasn't a very good trumpet player. But when I was about 6 years old, my family was living, before we moved into St. John's, we were living in New Melbourne. We'd moved from Toronto in 1972 to Newfoundland. You know, a city of, 1.5 million people at that point, in the early 70s, to a town, New Melbourne, of like 20 families.
New Melbourne, Newfoundland.
Yeah, above Trinity Bay. And so, you know, in the wintertime, what you can see out here with all the snow we've got, in the wintertime, getting around wasn't so when you're snowed into the house, things to keep the kids out of trouble. My dad had his old trumpet sitting in the basement. He hadn't played it for years. He hadn't looked at it. But it was his old trumpet that he had when he was going to college in London. He played trumpet in the college orchestra. And so he gave me that. And it was actually the sound of hearing a cornet played on the theme music of the Waltons. And I thought, geez, what's that sound? My dad said, well, that's a trumpet, actually a cornet, but he didn't have a cornet, so he told me it was a trumpet. And it was a gentleman by the name of Ewan Racy who played that solo. And it was a beautiful melody. And I had that concept of sound in my head when I picked up the instrument to play it. And like I said before about concept building, having a concept like that in your mind when you go to do something is half the battle. Now, I was 6 years old. My dad was able to write out some melodies for me and write the fingerings, and I figured that out. And I knew what the melodies, because he wrote melodies that I knew.
Mm-hmm.
Ode to Newfoundland, O Canada, God Save the Queen. Those are the first three tunes I learned. And then he would write out other melodies that I knew. And then I started listening to recordings of trumpet, and so I started wanting to play that music. And that music wasn't the easiest stuff in the world. So by the time I was around 10 years old, 11 years old, I was playing some pretty decent repertoire on the instrument. And by that point, I'd already joined the Gary Youth Band. I'd had a few lessons with Edsel Bonnell. And then he had recommended that I go study with Lester Goulding, who I studied with privately for a number of years. And so that kind of got me, and Lester was one of the greatest trumpet player I'd ever met in my short life at that point.
Yeah.
So he was a big inspiration for how to get the sound out of the instrument, how to practice, and he had amazing technical facility. So watching him practice, I'd come into my lesson, he'd be practicing, and it always blew my mind. And I thought, well, I got to be able to do that. And for me, excuse me, that's kind of been the leading force in my learning how to play the trumpet. If I heard anybody else do something I couldn't do, I got to learn how to do that. And it was always a thing of having to, and you know, when you're a kid trying to learn how to skateboard, you don't worry about how many scrapes and, you don't care about how many mistakes you make.
Yeah.
As long as you can get to that thing. As soon as you get the concept, as soon as you can do the thing, and all your friends, hey, look, watch me do this, and you can do the thing that you've been practicing and practicing and practicing, and they never saw the bumps and bruises and scrapes and crying and bawling your eyes out and all that stuff that it took to get to that. And that's learning a musical instrument.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of dedication, and it takes a lot of accepting that failure is just a step to learning, right? So
on that note, and we're going to go back to how long, because you haven't answered the question how long you would practice.
I haven't.
Not yet. Failure. Can you tell me of one instance where you're like, oh man, I did not do very well there? Was there ever a time? Because the trumpet is such a precise instrument.
I can tell you a great example of that was when I was about 13 years old, David Gray, who was the conductor of the symphony at the time, Newfoundland Symphony, he had taken me on as a student. He was a great French horn player. Played principal French horn on the symphony for a while.
Wow.
And he came here, took up a job as a conductor, and he heard me playing in the music festival, and he told my dad that he wanted to take me on as a student. This was before I started studying with Don Buble. And after about a year or so, he invited me to join the orchestra. So I started playing third trumpet in the orchestra. I was about 13 years old. And so it was great. It was a great opportunity, great experience for me to play with the orchestra. And Don Buble came to town. He was first trumpet, I was second trumpet. And what a wonderful opportunity it was for me to learn the world of playing in an orchestra. And it came to Christmas of, I think David Gray was gone at this point, so the conductor at this point was Charles Bornstein. And we were doing Messiah. I think I was about 16 years old. And we did two different versions of Messiah. And one of the versions of Messiah, Don Buble played the first trumpet part. And then he said, when we do the other one, let's switch. You play the first trumpet part. So I had to play the big trumpet solo.
Yeah.
The trumpet shall sound. This was the Hamilton Hardy arrangement of the Messiah.
And you're 13.
No. At this point, I was about 16.
Okay.
And there was two performances of this, and the whole choir was there, and there was this British gentleman who was conducting the orchestra, and my dad was playing. No, actually, my dad wasn't playing with the orchestra. He was in the audience. He was writing a review for the Telegram. And it came to the big solo, The Trumpet Shall Sound. And now, I realized about 30 seconds after The Trumpet Shall Sound, something that I hadn't realized during all the rehearsals, and that is that in that particular book, there's three different versions of The Trumpet Shall Sound. There's one where the trumpet plays all the way through.
Yeah.
There's one where the trumpet doesn't play as much.
Yeah.
And I had the version that where the trumpet doesn't play as much in front of me. So I started playing the piece, and then I didn't continue playing, and the conductor's looking at me. And I'm in a panic. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And Don Buell's trying to figure out which part it is I'm supposed to play. I think I played the first few bars of the piece, and I came in just in time for the ending of it. I was mortified.
Yeah.
This is in a concert. It was, it wasn't for lack
In the Basilica?
No, this was at the Arts and Culture
Arts and
Center.
Culture.
It was at the Arts and Culture Center back then. This would have been like 1983, probably 82, 83. It was a horrible experience, and I was devastated. I went home and I was really bummed out. And the conductor of the orchestra phoned me, and Peter Gardner phoned me. A bunch of people called me, and this stuff happens. Whatever. Get back on the horse and go and do it the next night. And so I did. I dusted myself off, and I went back to the second performance of it. I made sure that there was only one version of the piece on the music stand. I might have burned the other two. But I played it the next night, and I learned my lesson that always make sure you got the right chart on the stand.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, once it counted in, you're done.
Like, there's a whole host of things, and the reason I asked that was not to go down a negative road, but I mean, Gale Force Winds is about overcoming challenges. What an incredible description! There's so many things in there. Peter Gardner phoned you, the conductor phoned you. The support that's out there is important to your recovery after an incident like that, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and we don't, I guess, as professionals, as experienced people in our lives, what are we in our late 30s now? We share whatever nuggets of wisdom that we have with people who are less experienced. And I think when we do that and we offer it up, we do it from a place of, I guess, if you have some encouragement to offer somebody, you should. But at the same time, as students, when somebody offers us encouragement and guidance, we shouldn't think that we already know the answers and turn what's being offered away. And I was pretty proud at that point in my life. I was a 15-year-old kid. I was doing really well, 15, 16, whatever it was. I was doing really well in the music festivals. And
you had won the Rose Bowl, I think, at that point. Did you not?
Two, at that point. So for me, it was a big embarrassment to have that, the shine, what's underneath, right? The armor coming loose kind of thing. And I wasn't happy to pick up the phone and I thought for sure these people were going to be calling to lecture me about, you got to be organized. But as it was, I think Don Buell phoned me as well. And the words of encouragement was just basically, these things happen and you can't let it get the better of you and you can't let it beat you down. And I don't know how many times you see now, people are always posting about, Michael Jordan talks about it. People always think about how many championships he's won and how many baskets he's got, but they never talk about the ones that he's missed, right? And the things that we fail at are the little failures in our life that we experience. If you stop at that, then you never accomplish anything. But if you realize that a failure is an opportunity to learn, and I know I'm not saying anything new here, but really and truly, it's on a grand scale and it's on a microscopic scale. When we're practicing, the little tiny failures, the little things that don't work, go back over them until they do work.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between somebody who gets called for the gig and somebody who doesn't get called for the gig. And that's what it boils down to.
I'm going to go back to the question around time, practice time, and I'm going to explain to you why I'm so focused on this. So when I finally sat down next to you in the Brother Rice Band, I was probably practicing an hour a day. And when I actually heard what the trumpet could sound like, I really started to get obsessed with it. And I always joke, I'm in a Jazz East right now, and people ask me, how are you enjoying it? I'm hanging on by my fingernails. As you know, I did a business degree, not a music degree. I'm an amateur. But let me tell you this, after you came into my life and I listened to you and watched you play, I was like, holy shit, I've got to practice. I'd actually get up in the morning, probably do an hour in the morning. I'd come home lunchtimes oftentimes, practice, and then I'd do 2 or 3 hours at night. There was a period of time, and I actually was going to play the Hindemith Trumpet Concerto in Kiwanis. And that is a very difficult piece for me to play, probably easy for you, but I was practicing like probably 5-6 hours a day. And I'm going to tell you, it was primarily because I saw and I heard what the instrument could be like. And it was amazing. And, the challenge with a trumpet is the embouchure, sometimes it can wear it out, Anyway, back to your point, like when you're 6 years old, you start playing. To get to the level that you are, like, did you do, 10 hours of practice a day? How much time did you spend on that instrument?
You're not going to like the answer to that, Jerry.
Well, you're more talented than me, so you're probably going to say 5 minutes.
No, I wouldn't say it's a matter of talent. I would say I had exposure to, I don't know what everyone else was listening to or whatever, and I'll say this to any teacher, any student, you're only as good as what the sound you have in your head, the concept that you have in your head of the music. And I had, where everyone else had their pop records and they had this and that they were listening to, I was listening to Maurice Andre and Ed Tarr and whoever else I could get, Canadian brass and any orchestral stuff, whatever I could get my hands on, trumpet recordings. And I was trying to make myself sound like that at 7, 8, 9 years old as much as I could, 10 years old, 11 years old. By the time I got to high school, I spent a lot of time listening to a lot of trumpet. And I can guarantee you that most kids that sit in the school band, the best trumpet player they ever hear is the kid sitting next to them.
Yeah.
And most times, it's not a very good trumpet player. This is just another kid who. So I had the opportunity of concept building through listening to a lot of music and having the sound of the instrument, and I was studying privately. I was getting a lot of really good guidance. My lessons with David Gray were more about sound production and breathing, and at that point there was all the Salvation Army kids in town that I'd see at the music festival. They were playing all the really fast stuff, the Carnival of Venice and all that kind of thing. I want to play that stuff. And I remember David saying, none of that matters if you don't have sound.
Yeah.
And I always had a pretty good sound as a kid, but he got it so that the sound was focused and controlled, and that was, he got me to a point where he invited me to play with the orchestra, join the section. I wish I had practiced more as a kid. I practiced well, and I think I had enough to guide me strongly. But when I was a kid, I was not doing an hour a day. I didn't have an hour a day to practice but I was doing a lot of playing because I was in the Gower Youth Band, which met twice a week. I was in the Symphony, that met twice a week. For a while, I was at the Munn Prep School Band, which was on Saturday afternoon. So my whole Saturday was playing. So I was doing a lot of playing. And so that, a lot of those things kind of formed how I was as a player. Because a lot of kids, you're saying you practiced a lot. I don't know if you were taking private lessons or if you were...
I did for a period of time. But I'll say the private lessons focused a lot on, long notes and sound, and I was bored out of my mind.
And that's the thing. And that's a real trick is, because I was away for December and I didn't bring my horn with me. Came back in January and, like I said, my wife and I have got some concerts coming up. So we were away for a lot of February. And I brought my trumpet with me with a little Yamaha practice mute. So we're in hotels and all I can do is practice with that. So I'm not thinking about trying to play concertos or anything like that. I'm focused completely on sound, breathing, and building the tools for being able to play. And, there's some people there's different, I was going to talk about this because there's some people who talk a lot about buzzing with the mouthpiece. Some people talk about buzzing without the mouthpiece, like that kind of thing. And there's some schools of thought that say that doesn't work. It's got nothing to do with playing the trumpet. There's other schools of thought where they say start with the buzz, add the mouthpiece, add the trumpet. And basically, well, I think all of them have validity because each of the players that completely contradict each other are all great players. And so what works for them to build these concepts. But I think one of the things that we don't appreciate when we see somebody performing music on a stage, play a concerto on the trumpet, we got to practice all those notes. You have to spend time getting yourself into the sound of the instrument. And that's what long tones and melodic, long, sustained playing does. Being really careful about the articulation so that you're coordinating the air source with the tongue, getting the air stream so it's a nice full stream immediately at the beginning of the sound, and controlling the air stream with your core so that the sound is steady and you've got control of the vibrato and all the different aspects of the sound. So I think when we got students and we're teaching them how to do long tones, we have to give them all these little things to listen to. Because if you're just doing long tones for the sake of doing them, it's really boring. Like, I don't know if you've ever done a yoga class. If you
You have, yeah.
right? You do a yoga class and they just go, okay, we'll do this thing, then you go to this thing, then you go to this thing. It can be really boring. Also can be really hard, but really boring. But if you have a good yoga teacher, and I'm saying this because I just took up yoga a little while ago. I really enjoy it. The really good yoga teachers, I find, give you something to think about with all these different poses. So you're in downward dog for it feels like forever. And they're thinking, well, be aware of this, and be aware of that, and be aware of the other thing. And while you're doing long tones, be aware of the sound. Be aware of what your body's doing to make the sound better, to make the sound not as good. Be aware of everything that's going into creating the sound. And that's the benefit of long tones. And I do them all the time. I do pedal tones, I do long tones, I do scales, I do all the fundamental components of playing. And then when I have something technical to practice, I take it apart and I practice it slowly with a metronome. And I don't even try to play it up to tempo until I've done that a whole bunch.
Interesting.
Really slow, really controlled. And I mean, this kind of gets ahead of that a little bit, but I find we all have this tendency. You practice something slowly, you practice a scale, like it's just a major scale. You practice it up and down really, really slowly, really, really slowly. You do it like 30, 40 times. And then all of a sudden you go, gee, I wonder how it sounds now. And you go, and it doesn't sound that great.
Yeah.
Because it hasn't had time to kind of set in, you know?
Yeah.
So you really, when you're doing that kind of slow, careful practice, set your metronome and be true to it, and don't try and test to see if you gotten any better. Just trust the process. Get as much of the sound that you need into what you're playing. Get the valves all the way down to the end of the, make sure that you're moving them up and down and moving them quick so that you're not interrupting the flow with the movement of the valves, and get the air going. All that stuff. Be really hyper aware of every aspect of this thing that you're trying to do, and do it over and over again until, Kenny Werner talks about this in his Effortless Mastery book, making something the second nature. So you say you've got a passage you're practicing, and you take it apart and you're playing it really slowly. You play it without articulation. You add the articulation in. You're still doing it really slowly. And you keep doing that until your mind starts going into other stuff. Like right now you're thinking about every aspect of this. And then once you got to the point where you're doing that so naturally, you start thinking, oh, what should I have for supper tonight? Did I feed the cat? Oh, I don't have a cat. Did I walk the dog? I don't have a dog. You start thinking, look at that squirrel going over there. You start thinking about other things. And when that happens, this thing that had been the primary task becomes a secondary task, because now your mind's moved on to something else. But you're still doing all the mechanical stuff that you've done because you've done it so many times over and over again that it becomes second nature. And when it becomes second nature, then you can take it and the next time you come back to it, you'll be able to play it and it'll feel way more easy than it did before. I like to say that some of the stuff that Ofra and I do, especially the David Popper Hungarian Rhapsody, she can do this spiccato cello playing really fast. Right?
I've watched her.
Yeah, I think she broke the record for the Flight of the Bumblebee back in whenever. But it's when we rehearse it, she doesn't play it as fast as she does it on stage.
Yeah.
Right. But I never practice it. I do my very best to not practice. Sometimes I'm just dying to know if I can play it up to where she wants to do it. But I have to tell myself, don't do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Always practice it slowly, and I rarely allow myself to play it up to the speed that we play it in performance, because the adrenaline's going to do that. And if you're playing it slowly, your mind develops a clear concept of it, and your muscle memory develops a clear concept of where everything has to be. And then when you're playing the music, when you're in the middle of the music and the excitement is there, the adrenaline's there, and you're communicating with another musician, that carries you to the tempo. That carries you to the working tempo of it, because now you're being guided by the music, and your mind, your body is not. You're not thinking about it. You're just, I'm following the music. I'm playing 16th notes. She's playing 16th notes, and I can hear that my 16th notes are matching her 16th notes. I'm not trying to make it happen. It's happening because I spent so much time practicing slowly. So that's really the key, right?
Yeah.
That's what gets you to that. So whether it's playing fourth trumpet in the Jazz East Big Band and you're trying to get this lick happening, if you take that lick apart and get the air moving through every note, play it, don't try and swing it. Just play it straight out. And then you, put a metronome on it, maybe move it up a little bit slower, a little bit faster, mess with the articulation a little bit, and then add the articulation that's on the page to it with inflections and dynamics and all that kind of stuff. You start adding all the elements to it, and then you put it back into context with everything else, still at that tempo. Then you're going to come to rehearsal the next time, and that lick that has always gotten away from you, all of a sudden you'll just blast through it. And it'll be so easy to do, and you'll think, wow, I actually got better at this thing. Right?
Yeah.
Practicing smart, practicing effectively. And it doesn't take 10 hours a day to do that. It's just 1 hour of smart practicing beats 6 hours of banging your head against the wall.
It's funny, as you're talking, I told you there's a piece that I've been trying to perfect for 10 years, Feels So Good by Chuck Mangione, and I'd be damned I can't play that thing. I could get parts of it. You probably know it off the top of your head, do you?
I don't even know what key it's in.
Well, I tell you, then he goes effortlessly into the stratosphere on it. And that's what I'm really struggling with. I mean, part of it is I don't have the range to do it, I think. Yeah. Right? So, but, I don't know. I think listening to you talk.
A little trade secret I'll tell you off camera after about that. So don't beat yourself up so much.
Okay.
And with high register playing, extreme high register playing, that's a whole different thing, right? That's another concept building thing. And I hear so many kids in school band rooms blasting out high notes, trying to play Chameleon, Maynard Ferguson, and all this kind of stuff. And there's a lot of different approaches that people take to building high register. But I started getting into playing high notes, high register, extreme high register stuff when I just first joined the Navy years ago.
Well, I remember about 10 years ago, you came back to St. John's to play with Jazz East, remember?
Yeah.
And we played a bunch of Maynard songs.
Yeah.
And I went up to you and I said, holy crap, Mike, like your register was way up here now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it was very exciting for me because Maynard actually is one of the people that MacArthur Park was a song that I fell in love with, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I got to play with Maynard back in 93, I think it was. We did a thing up in Banff. And, I always found him to be a huge inspiration. His sound, that huge sound. Also, Doc Severinsen is another guy who's
I knew that you played with both of these, and that was something I was going to get into, but let's get into it now. So Maynard was someone that, you had listened to as a young fella, and then all of a sudden you were actually playing with. Tell us about that.
Oh, it was a matter of luck for me. I gotten into playing like big band lead trumpet stuff in the late 80s because I've been doing a lot of mostly classical stuff.
Yeah.
Right? And I spent a year in Banff at School of Fine Arts, and I was doing a lot of classical trumpet playing there with the brass quintet that I was part of. But in my private time, I was practicing learning bebop, and I was trying to figure out Charlie Parker and Miles Davis and Dizzy Gillespie and all these players. And I was listening. I'd been listening to a lot of big band jazz, a lot of Maynard Ferguson, and kind of thinking, oh, that's what those other guys do, you know. But I'd really gotten into listening to the Boss Brass, and I just loved the sound of Arnie Tchaikovsky. And I realized that he was the guy on the Hockey Night in Canada, up to the double A on the trumpet there. And I found myself gravitating more and more to that sound. And Doc Severinsen, the way he would play, and he always played the solos in front of the Tonight Show band, and I had those recordings, and so when I joined the Navy band out west, I was there as the lead trumpet player, and I'd spent a lot of time messing around with gear and messing around with different mouthpieces and that kind of stuff, and I got the great opportunity to meet Arnie Tchaikovsky. There was one solo that I was playing with the Navy band, where at one point it went up to a double A on the trumpet, right? Ba-da-ba-da-da-wee, up to this high note, and I was always not making it, I'd kind of get up there and it wasn't happening for me, and I was really frustrated. And I got the great opportunity to meet Arnie, and he was one of my big heroes. And I said, Arnie, so I don't know if you can help me with this, but I said, I'm great up to a G above the staff, an octave above the staff, but getting to that A, it's not happening for me, right? And I was expecting, well, you got to do this and got to do this, and then hours and hours and blah blah blah, and charts and all this sorts of stuff. But Arnie was very direct and very straight ahead, and looked at things in a very simple way as a trumpet player. And he said, "Oh, you just got to back off." And I realized that I was muscling it. I was trying to muscle it too much to get up there. Well, I was just trying to force it. Yeah. And I realized that that's not what it took. It took a different kind of playing, And so, I did get a great opportunity to work with Arnie a bunch. Sat next to him in a few things, and a few years later, there was the Commonwealth Games that was taking place in Victoria, BC, and I went up to Arnie's place to play some duets, and he was giving me a lesson.
He lived in Victoria?
He was living in Anoose Bay, just north of just near Nanaimo. Okay, yeah. And I went up there. I drove up there, and I had recorded in the studio all the stuff that was being played in house for the Commonwealth Games that year, and Arnie had recorded all the stuff that was for CBC in Toronto. So he was the lead trumpet player on that stuff, and I was the lead trumpet player on this stuff that was recorded in Victoria. Ian McDougall had contracted and conducted it. And so anyway, we're at Arnie's place, and we went through we had a range building exercise that we went through, and some other stuff that we kind of talked about, totally geeking out. And he said, let's go play a game of pool at the pub. So we went down to the pub and grabbed a pint, and we're playing pool with your hero. With my hero, right? And but the funniest thing was, and I took this as a huge compliment, it was I'll never forget him saying this. We're playing, and the TV is on, CBC is on, and they've got the Commonwealth Games going on. And we're not really paying attention, but all of a sudden we heard this flurry of trumpet playing on the TV. And Arnie looks at me, he goes, was that me or you? I thought, well, that's a rare moment to occur in a pub. Was that me or you? Anoose Bay, one of two people it could possibly be. And he was definitely one of my heroes as far as lead trumpet playing goes. And there's been a bunch of other people that I've aspired to kind of learn their language of that particular art form. Snooky Young and Wayne Bergeron, one of the great living lead trumpet players nowadays. I follow him a lot, actually. Roger Ingram and this is actually the new generation of the Wayne Bergeron Yamaha trumpet. Is that right? Yeah, I just picked this up a little while ago. This is interesting. What do you have that on there for? So we can see it there. The slide doesn't fall out. Oh yeah, you've got yours a lot better than mine. I wouldn't say. Look, of course, I got that thing there and it gets it. Well, that's what that's for. But they put this on there so it snaps back, right? It saves you a little bit of trouble.
So Wayne Bergeron, incredible player. I saw him play at the Maynard Ferguson tribute. Oh my God, there's something else. But back to Maynard. So you ended up playing with Maynard.
Well, yeah, I had, it's kind of a long story, isn't it? It took us a while to get there. But I'd been doing a lot of lead trumpet playing. I was lead trumpet in the Navy band. And then Hugh Fraser, who had a big band in Vancouver called the Vancouver Ensemble of Jazz Improvisation. I'd heard about them in the 1980s when I was going to MUN. Somebody had brought one of their records in. And I thought, wow, this band is amazing. They're way more kind of wild band, big band than the Boss Brass was, which was a real kind of neat and tidy, operation out of Toronto.
Yeah.
And Vancouver Ensemble of Jazz Improvisation, known as the VEJI, Veggie. The leader of that band, Hugh Fraser, had invited me to go up to Banff for a jazz orchestra workshop. He'd asked me to join Veggie as a lead trumpet player, and he invited me to go up there. So there was all these great players from across the country, and some people from international, from other countries and whatnot. They were there just to play big band music for a few weeks. That was in 1992, and then 1993, he did the same thing again. And I think the year before, we had Kenny Wheeler come up as a guest, and we had one other guest. And then the second year we did it in 93. He told me, he said, we got Slide Hampton coming up, Muhal Richard Abrams, and Maynard Ferguson's going to be. I'm like, Maynard, crazy. And one of Maynard's favorite lead trumpet players, a guy named Walter White, lives in Detroit. Now he was there as well. So there was two of us playing lead trumpet in this big band, and I'd never heard a trumpet player like Walter before in my life. This guy's bigger than life, huge personality. He had just come off playing with Maynard's band. He'd been there for 2 or 3 years in the early 90s. So he was really close with Maynard. And so when Maynard showed up and we're rehearsing all this great stuff, Chameleon. And I'll never forget playing Chameleon, because a lot of times when the band played Chameleon, Maynard's band, trumpets go out front and they all do the thing.
Yeah.
And so there was 6 trumpets in our trumpet section. And so Maynard came back into the trumpet section. He stood between myself and Walter.
So he's the 7th trumpet when he
he's playing the lick with us, right?
Yeah.
Up on the top of the horn. But whatever.
Yeah.
At that point, finesse has gone out the window, right? Anyway, so we're playing, and it's really loud, We got monitors around us, and drums are just right there, and so we play that whole thing, and then there's a few bars where the band kind of goes along before we come back in with the thing. And Maynard turns to me and he says something to me, and for the life of me, I have no idea what he said.
Yeah.
But we're on stage, and there's 1,000 people in the audience. So I smiled and I laughed,
Was it like, did you interpret it as something good, or was he criticizing you, or what?
He was cheerful.
Okay.
In his demeanor, I took that what he was saying was something
Cheerful,
positive.
okay.
It wasn't like this.
Yeah.
It wasn't like grabbing the front of my hand and go like this,
Get off the stage.
You forget, take up bagpipes or something. No, he was saying so. He was just probably cracking a joke or something.
Yeah.
I had no idea what he said. And there was a few friends of mine that were in the audience. Hey, what did Maynard say to you? I was like,
no idea.
I can't tell you. It's between me and him. Secret.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I actually got an invitation. His manager was with him. Ed Sargent was with him. And they asked me to go and join the band after that, his big band. And I went home from that experience in Banff, and I got ready to leave the Navy because I wanted to go on Maynard's band. But timing didn't work out, and also around that time, Maynard started touring with his Big Bop Nouveau band, which is only 3 trumpets.
Yeah.
The big band was 4 trumpets. So at that point, he no longer needed this 4th trumpet player. So the gig kind of evaporated, and as it happened, I started getting more busy and busy with freelancing and a lot of the studio and professional work on the west coast of Canada. So it was probably for the best that I didn't go out on the band, because that would have kept me away from that. I would never have been able to establish myself after the Navy. But it was nice to be asked.
Yeah, no, I bet.
And I'm sure it would have been a hell of an experience. But it was great to have a chance to to meet the man and to play with him. And, I've been fortunate with a lot of the great people I've gotten to work with over the years. And
Tell us about Doc Severinsen.
Doc, I met Doc at the International Trumpet Guild conference in Banff in 2008. Jens Lindemann was running the thing, and Jens called me up and said, I want you to come up to the ITG because I'm going to feature a bunch of trumpet players from different countries and with a big band, and I want you to be on the concert, So that's great. So I went up there, I brought one of my charts up, and we rehearsed with this big band. It was like, Walter White and Ingrid Jensen and Alan Bizzuti and Andrea Tofinelli and a bunch of different trumpet players were all taking turns playing with this big band. It was like a big parade of trumpet players at the beginning of this concert. And I was the first one to go on. Jens is up on the microphone there, and he's talking. He's saying nice things about me. He's talking, this guy plays this instrument and that instrument. And he's saying all these great things about me, which really and truly, at a trumpet conference, you got 1,000 trumpet players in the audience, and you got a big band there. You know that everyone in the audience is sitting there going, really? You don't say. Let's see,
Yeah.
But he's saying nice things about me, so I'm not feeling too bad about that. But then I hear this voice right behind me saying, well, I guess you better not screw it up then. He used a different word than that. But I turned around and it's Doc Severinsen. I was like, oh, great.
For anyone who doesn't know, because this is a business podcast primarily, Doc Severinsen led the Tonight Show band for...
I think everyone knows Doc Severinsen.
Decades.
30 years.
Yeah. If you don't know him, well...
Yeah, Doc... and the next time I encountered Doc was about 5 years later. We did a concert. Jens was responsible for this one as well. He put together a concert at Kerner Hall in Toronto. And the big band was basically what they called the Yamaha All-Star Big Band kind of thing. So they got everyone involved in this. And I was playing lead trumpet in the band. And I forget who else was in the section. I think Steve McDade was there, another one of my heroes in Toronto. Anyway, and Doc was there. And we rehearsed with Doc. And this was a new situation for me, a new experience for me, because I'd worked with a lot of really great big band leaders over the years. But Doc Severinsen is arguably probably one of the only big band leaders who had a big band that he rehearsed and worked with and performed with every day, every working day and evening for 30 years.
Yeah.
So the way he rehearsed a big band was different than anything I'd experienced. And it was quick and efficient, and it asked so much of you without feeling like you're being tasked with anything.
Yeah. Interesting.
To describe it, it was a really new experience, and it was very exciting. And so we rehearsed, and then we came to the concert, and I've been playing these. I don't know if you've seen these mouthpieces that I played.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about it. Yeah,
wedge mouthpiece. It's not. I don't know if you can see that on the camera there, but it's kind of got a dip in it. So
yeah.
It's not as symmetrical. It's not flat like a coin, like conventional mouthpieces. So I've been playing on these mouthpieces. I can describe the whole thing.
Yeah.
But you can go on wedge mouthpieces, and Dave Harrison, the inventor, does a better job than I would.
Do you have any extras there? I wouldn't mind trying one later, but...
Oh, yeah, we'll get into that.
Okay.
Anyway, so I'm warming up backstage, right? And Doc walks over and he says, man, I love your sound.
Really? Doc says to you.
Yeah. And I'm like, I said, well, thanks, man, because I had always thought Doc Severinsen had that golden trumpet sound that nobody else had, And I'd listened to all the Tonight Show recordings. I'd worn out the tapes, back in the day when we had cassette tapes. And so I was thrilled to hear him, have him say that to me. And I was he was like, what's that mouthpiece? And I'd just gotten this new wedge mouthpiece. I'm telling all about it. I could see him glazing over. He's not interested. He was just being nice, And then we go on stage, and we're playing with the band. And there was this piece that we did where the trumpet section came out in front of the band. It was a thing that he did with the Dorsey band back early. It was a 2-trumpet feature, and so we basically split the trumpet section up into 2 halves. So between us and him, there was 5 or 6 of us.
Yeah.
And so it's all the trumpets on the front of the stage. And I'll never forget, because there was a lot of trumpet players in the audience. You know, a friend of mine, Larry Larson from the Kitchener Waterloo Symphony, he's sitting in the front row with about 3 other trumpet players on either side of him, right? And you know, so another one of those don't screw up moments, right? Anyway, so we're playing this tune, and we play, and it was much like the Maynard Ferguson story, where there's a few bars rest, and Doc turns to me and says something. But I heard him.
Yeah.
I heard what he said. He said, "Man," he says, "I'm really digging your sound."
Yeah.
Which to me was a really nice thing to hear. You know, I've worked very hard at having a good trumpet sound, and you know, so I was thrilled to have him say that, and I was so excited about it that I came in a bar early after that. With all these trumpet players sitting
No way.
yeah, thinking, okay.
So did that screw everyone up a little bit, or like how did you guys recover?
I mean, I like come blaring in. I just kind of, it's a bar. and then I played with the band. I could see Doc kind of going,
Okay.
I take it back.
Last time I'll give you a compliment.
That's it. The last time I'll give you a compliment. Yeah. Anyway, it was, and you know, I had the chance to hang with him after the concert. We talked a lot, and he was, you know, he was in his 80s at that point. And he's still around. He's just
like 95 now or something.
He just did his 10th final concert a little while ago. I saw him play a few years ago with the Canadian Staff Band, Salvation Army Staff Band in Toronto. But this was the last one I played with him was 2013. So that's 11 years ago. And he was in his 80s at that point. And he was talking about, you know, that he still practices every day and still works hard at it. And he's probably one of the fittest people I've met. He had a Marine sergeant was his trainer, personal trainer, that would work out with him like every day.
Wow.
And it was really inspiring. You know, I as you've seen in the house here, we've got a little gym in the house, and my wife and I work out. We exercise every day. Fitness, being in good health, makes a huge difference to be able to do something as physical as playing a musical instrument. And having that conversation with Doc and seeing, I mean, he's a guy he's been around playing for, 70 years almost, right? You know, since he first started playing professionally and whatever. You can see pictures of Doc as a kid playing these trumpet sections. And then you put that with his career with the Tonight Show Band and his touring as a soloist and a conductor and all the stuff that he's done since. And before that, what an immense career he's had. And he's been able to do it because he's practiced a lot, really efficiently, and he stays in really good shape. He's, and so it's really, I found that really inspiring to have that experience,
Like you've, young man growing up in St. John's, the experiences that you've had in the musical world. I mean, I've followed along on Facebook when that became a thing, and that's how I knew that you had rubbed shoulders with some of these people. What does it mean to you to be, have grown up in St. John's and then, like, you've been all over the musical world and met so many interesting people? How does it make you feel now, in reflection?
Well, everyone's got to come from somewhere, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I've never really given it much thought. I've always kind of moved forward, take whatever opportunities that were there and make the most of them. The experience with Doc Severinsen, it got me to count bars a little more carefully, right?
That's important in music.
It is, yeah. But it's not a very forgiving business, right? You're in a recording studio and you got a whole orchestra around you or a big band or whatever, and a lot of times in a big band or an orchestra, when the going gets going, you're the loudest person in the band, right? And so that can put a lot of pressure on a person. So being able to keep a clear mind and keep focused on what the task is at hand, and making sure that you've got the preparation, that you've put the hours in, that you know that you can rely on what tools you've built in order to be successful. Because when you're in a recording studio, you know that if you step all over it, they're on the phone calling the next person on the list.
Yeah.
You know,
And there's a lot lining up in that list, I would imagine.
I had one situation where this was at CBC in Toronto, and I think it was an full orchestra movie soundtrack that we were doing, and I don't know half the people in the thing. I knew the guy playing second trumpet because he was one of the guys from Toronto Symphony. So you go in a lot of these movie soundtrack sessions. You're in there for a day or a couple of days or whatever, and you get a stack of music. And they're all cues like 3, M4, whatever. It's just, they don't name them. They're not like, oh, Billy sings a song. Or, you know, mailman gets bitten by a dog, whatever. It's just these cues. And you go through it. You get the first one, the conductor calls the first one, you read it, you play it down. Usually,
So you're sight reading.
Usually there's no rehearsal.
Whoa.
So you get to the session, you kind of thumb through the stuff, you look for anything that looks tricky, and you have a go at that.
Yeah.
And then if anything looks easy, well, you go past that because you figure you'll rely on your sight reading skills and all the tools that you've brought in your tool bag, right? And we get to this one cue, and I open up the sheet, and it's like two pages of kind of lyrical legato trumpet playing. And I look at the second trumpet player's music stand. He's got nothing. He's just got bars rest, right? And I look over the trombone section. They got nothing. French horn's got nothing. I'm like,
This is where I usually panic when that happens. But anyway,
maybe it's just me and woodwinds or something, you know, or strings or whatever.
yeah.
Anyway, there was some electronic pads that had been pre-recorded. So this is like a movie soundtrack. So there's all kinds of different elements to the sound. And the conductor counts it in. He said, "We're just going to take this from bar whatever." And it's like 2 bars before I come in. Okay, so I got my headphones on, got my horn there. Nobody else is doing anything. Everyone's just sitting there picking their noses, you know. And so I pick my horn up and I start playing. So we record the thing, and I did what I came to do. You know, I did the job, and they wanted a second take to kind of just make sure they have everything, choices, whatever. Do this slightly differently, that kind of thing. We did 2 takes of it, and I played them. You know, I didn't embarrass myself at all. And I was pretty happy with how I did, and then they were happy, so I went away from that. And a lot of times you do a recording session, you never think about it, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I was on a plane, Air Canada plane, looking through the movies, and I see, oh, I think that's that movie soundtrack that had the big trumpet solo, right? Because you know, a lot of times you don't have that kind of a big feature in a movie, so I thought, well, I'm going to watch this movie, you know. And thankfully, the trumpet solo came in like within the first 5 minutes of the movie. I'm not going to say what movie it was, but it came in the first 5 minutes of the movie because the movie was terrible. But the trumpet solo sounded really good. I was pat myself on the back. I think I'll have another drink, you know. I turned the movie off after that because it was a horrible movie. So, you know.
Mike, we're having an incredible conversation, and I do have to ask you this. So you're in the Navy, and you decide to go freelance. You go, like, tell us a little bit about that journey.
The journey?
Yeah.
The journey was a forces reduction program in 1994, wherein the Canadian Forces decided they were going to reduce from having 9 bands and a couple of station bands to having, they went down to 5 bands. So the Naden Band, which is the Navy band on the Pacific coast of Victoria, was being dismantled.
Interesting.
It's actually back up. They I don't know why this happened, but they put that band back together. They actually increased the numbers again a little bit and brought 1 or 2 of the bands back, but I think there's only 6 maybe now. And at that point, I was a petty officer 2nd class, equivalent of a sergeant, and I was qualified to go up in rank to petty officer 1st class or a warrant officer, if it's the Army equivalent. So because of that qualification that I'd gotten, when they were reducing the numbers, they were basically giving everyone a golden handshake, right? Just here's a bunch of money, please leave. And there was a bunch of people that didn't make this because they didn't have the seniority. They were cut.
Right.
So it was really sad for quite a few people because I knew people that would wanted to stay in and weren't able to. And I'd been really thinking with the Maynard thing, that offer sort of in the background and some other things that I was becoming involved in, things that I was really interested in being involved with that I wouldn't be able to pursue by being still in the military. When they came up with that offer, I thought, you know what, I'm going to take the money and run and go. So I had a little bit of a nest egg when I got out of the Navy, some money to live on so that I could have the opportunity to not starve while I was building my freelance career. And at that point, I'd been doing a lot of bass playing. So I was in Victoria, Vancouver, and between the Vancouver Island and the mainland, I was pretty busy.
In your freelance?
In my freelance world, I got pretty busy fairly quickly, which I was very grateful for. But I did take the offer to get out.
Yeah.
And I think probably by doing that, somebody else got to keep their gig.
Yeah.
I'm not patting myself too much on the back for that because my reasons were perfectly selfish. But in retrospect, it'd be nice to think that somebody else got to keep their gig because I got out. But yeah, I never looked back.
So you've been freelance for over 30 years?
Yeah, it was in 1994, so just about 30 years. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. I was in on the West Coast in British Columbia for a total of 18 years. And it's funny because I was just back there last month and saw a bunch of people that I'd worked with, and I realized that I've been away from there for nearly as long as I lived there. But I spent a lot of time in Ontario, playing the shows for Mervish and doing a lot of touring out of Toronto and a lot of studio work between there. And I go back to Vancouver once in a while and do some recording work as well. But
you used to go to Japan a little bit, didn't you?
I did. I went there on 2 tours with shows for a company out of New York called Nederlander Productions or whatever. But they run a lot of the shows in New York and have touring companies that send Broadway shows out. So I went out there twice. I was there, I think, about 7 weeks, and then the second time I went out there was about a 6-week tour. I saw Bill Carney there both times.
Yeah, Bill. We went to school. Bill, great drummer. Let me ask you this: what are you working on right now for anyone who's interested in the musical side of what you're doing?
Well, right now, this minute, I'm taking this afternoon to hang out with you. If you weren't here, I'd be at my computer and my keyboard there, writing music, finishing up the score for a musical theater production that's being mounted by Terraboo's Productions here in St. John's. It's going to take place at the Majestic Theater and at Theater Aquarius in Hamilton. This is kind of like a first run of the show, and then I think they're going to fine-tune it and then maybe send it to Toronto and have a run there. I don't know what their plans are, but so I've been working with that production for a little while. Bob Hallett asked me if I would be interested in writing for a show like that because he thought this particular show would be, as he put it, in my wheelhouse. And I've done a lot of writing for big band orchestra and worked in music theater. I've been playing music theater. I don't know how many music theater productions I've played trumpet for. So my experience in that world, I guess he felt that I had the scope of knowledge that I could bring something valuable to the table. I hope that's the case. So I'm working on that, and my wife and I, we've got some concerts coming up over the next little while. We're kind of gradually, cautiously getting back to touring after COVID and some other things that have been occurring in our lives. But we'll be at the Stratford Music Festival this summer in Ontario. Looking forward to doing that. We're playing somewhere in Welland, Ontario, coming up in a few weeks, and just kind of building back to our touring schedule as much as we have the breath for these days, because
You've been touring a long time.
we've been doing it for a lot of years, so we're being a little bit more choosy with what we go out for. We do love to travel, but travel becomes a whole other thing when you got to buy a seat for a cello and carry a whole bunch of stuff with you.
Yeah.
But anyway, not to put too much of a negative spin on that. We enjoy it. We love playing music together, and so we're doing that. And we've had 3 albums come out of our production company in the last year, and it's been a lot of work doing that. So
Yeah.
I think I'm probably going to take it easy from producing anything new in that regard. But always writing, always practicing, always working on the next concert.
Amazing. I'm actually going to do something selfish now and ask. And I said I might do this. When you talked about high notes, that's something that reminds me. I'm bringing in a golf analogy. Everyone goes to the range, tries to hit the driver as far as they can, and they don't focus on the putting. But I am going to ask you to just give me a couple of tips about trying to play a little higher. Can you do that?
I don't know if it's so much of a tip. One of the things about playing high notes is building the confidence.
Yeah.
And if you can do something, at one pitch, you can do it a semitone higher. So one of the concept things for range building, and this is actually a very simple thing. It doesn't start very high. So just playing, I like to call that Exactly. Now, when you're doing that, you want to think about a few things. First of all, you want to make sure that the transition between the notes is as smooth as possible, so your valves are moving quickly. And you want to make sure that the tone quality remains consistent all the way through. So really listen for it. And then you're going to take that same concept, listening just as clearly, go up a semitone.
Yeah.
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 So you keep doing that, you move up chromatically, and in the middle of the horn, it's really easy to get that big, fat, nice, relaxed sound. One of the things that people do when they go playing high is they'll go, and they engage something that we call the Valsalva maneuver, which if you're trying to lift something up that's really heavy, a lot of times your throat closes up.
Yep.
And if there's no air, there's no sound. So having the confidence to be able to get up to that note and be relaxed about it so that the sound can actually come out and be a nice big sound. This exercise kind of builds that confidence, because what we're doing is we're playing those notes, just that little slow trill, if you will, moving up semitone. So when you get to the top of the staff, still keeping it relaxed. Now, getting up to there, we're always telling ourselves, this is only a semitone higher, so nothing really has to change. Not very much at all has to change. Going from that register up a semitone, up a semitone, up a semitone, up to the high C, to the D, whatever, nothing really has to change, right? So what you're doing is you're building the confidence of being able to play those notes, and getting sort of that concept of playing in that register of the instrument. And you realize it's a bit of a different thing to play up there. Now, when it comes to playing, where did I put it? when it comes to playing,
Yeah.
yeah. When it comes to playing anything sort of more lead trumpet orientated. That's not even a word.
A lot of people use it.
Yeah, no. I use different gear. I use a different mouthpiece, not because it helps me to play higher, but I use a different mouthpiece because it helps me to get the sound that I want. And there's a lot of trumpet players that sit there and go, oh, you should only use one mouthpiece. It's like, well, if you only have one job, you should only use one mouthpiece. But if you have a bunch of different kinds of jobs, you need to have different kinds of mouthpieces.
Yeah.
That'd be like a plumber showing up at your house. Well, I got my wrench. Well, you're not going to need that. You need a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
That's kind of the same thing. So for that, you can hear it's a bit of a brighter sound. I don't know how much these microphones can handle.
Yeah.
So that's
the redlining.
Redlining, yeah. So one of my favorite licks is the Wayne Bergeron's thing from the Incredibles. That's that A I was talking about before.
Which I've never been able to play in my entire life.
No, but this is the Wayne, like I said before, this is the Wayne Bergeron Yamaha trumpet. So this is actually built especially for playing that lick.
Amazing.
I'm kidding.
I'll take it all, hook, line, and sinker.
There you go. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, to go from what we were talking about with a little back and forth, G to A kind of thing, to what I was doing just there, there's a bit of time and concept building involved in that. You wouldn't be able to get that all into a session like this, but with time, you could get close to it. But it also takes concept building, right?
Well, you know what, Mike? We have had one heck of a chat here this afternoon, and I have to say thank you. Last time I sat next to you would have been 1983, I guess, in high school.
We graduated in 84, so I don't know if you that last year.
82, 83.
That's right.
84.
I quit the trumpet section in the high school. I wanted to play percussion. They looked like they were having so much fun back there. I wanted to play the drum.
Yeah, I was going to criticize you for that. You really let me down when you did that, you know?
We do what we can, right?
Well, you know, this has been an incredibly enjoyable afternoon for me. You know, as I said to everyone, there's talent, and then there's Mike. Frankly, you've brought the instrument, and you've done so well in the musical world. It's just so exciting to sit next to you and listen to you talk about it. I could go on and on and on. I mean, you have French horns back there and everything. We never even got into that.
No.
My son played French horn for a while. It was the first time I ever played. That's
a tough instrument.
Sticking the hand in and trying to make it work.
Trying to make it. It's a tough instrument, and that's another instrument that I wouldn't take that out and, like, if the orchestra phoned me up, say, you want to play French horn? No, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
When I'm here in the studio and I've got stuff here and I can practice the lick and then I can make it sound good, then I can do that. But I don't have time to work on a whole piece of music for somebody else. I'll do it in my studio, and I've done tons of that stuff with my big band stuff. And it's another instrument where I'll be sitting there recording something, looking at it on the page, and thinking, "Who wrote this crap?" And I realized I was the guy that wrote the crap. But sometimes I write things without thinking about how hard they are. But without practice, you can get your mitts around it and figure it out. You know?
Mike, we'll finish this up for everyone watching now, but I'd say this. What's interesting about music, the juxtaposition of music and business, like, you've been freelancing now for over 30 years. It just fascinates me. The importance of music to people is so important. But then someone like yourself who's freelanced, you've been solopreneur for so long. I find that fascinating, and I hopefully, people watching Gale Force Wins. Let me ask you this to end it. What advice would you give to people, be it business advice, musical advice, or a juxtaposition of both?
Well, when I was a kid, my dad said to me, never say no to a gig, Just make sure you're prepared when you get there. And that's kind of the business of music, is that you have to be willing to play all kinds of different, and when you're starting out, you're playing all kinds of different sorts of gigs. But if you do a really good job, then you'll get hired for another gig, and then the gigs start getting better, and they start getting more high profile. And there's in music they always say there's three components to any gig that you're going to do. There's the money, there's the music, and then there's the hang. And if you have two of those elements, the gig is worth doing. If you only have one of them, it's not worth doing. So money and the music is good. People aren't so great. Oh, you can deal with that. Just get paid, play the music, and off you go. Sometimes in the jazz world, the money's not that great, but the music is fantastic and the people are great. So you got those two elements. You'll do the gig because it has those two elements. And then there'll be other times where the money's great, the people are great, but the music ain't so great.
Yeah.
You take the gig because you know you're going to enjoy yourself and you get paid. But the mistake a lot of musicians will make is that they take a gig just because the money's there. Then they realize they're really unhappy and it's been a completely unfulfilling experience and it doesn't get them anywhere. And if the music is just good but the people are terrible, the money's terrible, well, that only goes so far. And then the same thing for the hang. Once in a while we get all three. But when it comes to taking a gig, whether you're not going to take it or take a gig, that's a good thing to kind of have as a rule of thumb, although I was using my fingers to count. But
You're funny. He has a bit of humor as well. Well, Mike, again, it's an absolute pleasure to sit next to someone who's taken his craft to the level that you have. And it's an example to anyone watching. You just put the time in and the effort and be prepared, right?
Yeah, and it's important to have hobbies too.
Yeah.
I've been studying, I've gotten to a point where I can identify birds.
Really?
Yeah, just the other day somebody said, well, what's that flying over there? I said, yeah, those are birds.
You're a funny guy. Thank you very much.
Thanks, man.
Thank you for tuning in to Gale Force Wins. That's Gale Force Wins, WINS.com.